I've often wondered about that myself. My grandfather died when I was 6 years old. He was a coal miner, and he died of black lung. I don't remember a lot about it. At the time I was his youngest grandchild, and I was the apple of his eye, even though I don't remember him really well. And I remember from the very earliest time that the thought of embalming, taking a human body and just filling it full of chemicals, just was really weird to me. It just really gave me the willies. I remember that from a very early age. And of course, being a child of the 60s, when you're in college, you guys sit around and will talk about anything, talk about everything. And I remember I used to tell my friends, look, when I die, just roll me in a sheet and tuck me under the roots of a big oak tree. Let that be the marker. That's it. And surprisingly, I was onto something. And I guess it's the Lord's doing. For some reason in the 90s, it's really not a subject I think anyone would choose to really delve into and study, and I didn't choose it. Some friends passed away, died, and so all my revulsion at chemical embalming kind of resurfaced. And then for some strange reason that I have no idea about, information started coming to me from different sources over a long period of time about death and burial and funerals. And when we came down south, here to Charleston, I got a job at a hospital. I was a professional photographer at the time, and my job was in staff development, which was training for nurses and doctors. They have to have continuing education, and the hospital handled that. So part of that was videotaping lectures, and I was in the video library one day and found a tape which was it was about how to treat a Jewish patient who dies in the hospital, how to care for them. And since all this stuff was coming to me anyway, for some reason it sparked my interest, and I watched it. And I had actually been telling my sons at that time, because I had some friends who died, and I was kind of revolted at the whole funeral industry. And I remember telling my sons once that if I should die and I can't, due to legal reasons, I can't be buried in an Orthodox manner, you are to break into the morgue, steal my body, and bury me at sea. So they're like, oh, sure, Dad. Okay, we'll do that. But I watched this videotape about care for a Jewish patient, and it just seemed like, well, that's what we should be doing. And that actually prompted me to start looking into it. And I found out, yes, our traditions are very much the same as their traditions. We're not as rigid about a lot of things. We operate under grace, not under the law. And so while we have things as they should be, there's always economia, and we can deal with whatever situation we happen to be in. And that really piqued my interest, and that was around the birth of the internet. So I also had access to easy information on the internet, and I started looking into it. And one day I went to the church office, Father John was there, and I said, Father John, I have all this information on Christian burial. Surely you can find a seminarian who needs a thesis, have him write a book. He said, no, you do it. So I was kind of stuck at that point to do it. So it really started as instructions. It was simply an instruction manual for us, for our parish, as what to do when someone in the parish dies. In most states, in 41 of the 50 states, it's perfectly legal for families and churches to bury their own dead without a funeral director. Funeral directors don't want you to know that, but it's perfectly legal. So I wrote an instruction manual just thinking through step by step by step everything that needed to be done. And our first funeral was tragic. We talk about it in our workshop. One of our friends, a parishioner, died on his way out of the hospital. He was in the wheelchair leaving the hospital, and he died. And he left 3 teenage orphans. His wife had already passed. She died in a car wreck several years before. So it was a real tragedy, but we took it on and did everything ourselves. Some land was donated for a grave out on Guatemala Island, and a few of us pooled our resources and bought a casket. We bought the cheapest casket that was available, and a few of us went down to the morgue at the medical university to prepare his body for burial. And amazingly, everything just went by the book. It was a very smooth process. It is literally the easiest thing, simplest. I wouldn't say easiest. I would say it's the simplest thing. I like to tell people and remind them that if you've ever washed a baby, you can do this. It's a simple process. We've been doing it as long as people have been around, preparing people for burial. So we prepared his body, and we put him in the back of a parishioner's Suburban for transport out to the island. And 2 or 3 parishioners were out there digging his grave while we were doing that. And I was the last one heading out the door, and the director of the morgue asked me into his office. That was the first time I had ever signed a death certificate on the line that is for the funeral director, which is a strange experience. And he said, "Mr. Barna, we've had Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists in here. You are the first Christians." That is almost heartbreaking. They're very used to having people come in there and do what we do, but not Christians. And so we transported his body out. We had the funeral out on Guatemala Island at a small chapel out there, and we buried him in the ground. And that was the very first one. So everything worked. Made some minor revisions and additions to it, and I don't remember how, but people started asking for a copy. So I would Xerox it, and I would comb bind it, and I'd send them a copy, or someone would carry it to them or whatever. And over about the next, we started adding to it a little bit more than an instruction manual, because if you're going to talk about burying people in an Orthodox manner, the first question you have to ask is, well, why should we care? Seriously, why should we care how someone is buried, or if they're buried at all? So that's a very important thing to consider. So the second revision of the book was written for Orthodox Christians. And again, it went around by comb binding. And at some point, we decided, maybe other people who don't know anything about Orthodoxy might like to know why this is important. So we actually added some more information for others who might read the book. And ultimately, after about 5 years, one of those copies made it to California, where then Abbot Jonah read it. And Abbot Jonah decided that they needed to publish it, and they are now the publisher. Of course, Abbot Jonah became Metropolitan Jonah, and we're very grateful to him that he published it. And the book now it's in its third printing and its second edition. So it's really been surprising for us and gratifying, because when we wrote it, we just assumed that everyone would think we're just crazy and just dismiss us out of hand, and they didn't. It's really it's been quite remarkable, the response that people have had. And if you ever have the opportunity to even observe a body being prepared for burial, it's the simplest service, the simplest act that you can do, but it's so powerful. It really is incredibly powerful, and people are just amazed at the power. It's a service of love.
As it should be. Yeah.
Did years burn out those words? Did a voice whisper absurd? Did your mind comprehend and ask if you'd last till the end? Traded money and lands, family dreams and plans for